We are gathered here today to remedy what I referred to in my review of this controller as Razer's lazy customization, basically a faceplate and a battery tray cover with $180 MSRP. Granted, I mentioned this was on sale for $120 on Amazon, that's what I paid for it, but still incredibly steep considering this is a standard Xbox controller. It doesn't have any pro controller features like trigger stops, rear buttons, and swappable thumbstick caps. And even from a cosmetics or appearance standpoint, this could look so much more gorgeous, as we're going to see here in a few minutes. And everything used in today's project or build is going to be linked in the description below. There are 5 10mm screws which need a T8 Torx screwdriver to remove them. Then on the board there's going to be some 7mm screws which are a T6 Torx screwdriver. It all sounds pretty crazy, but guess what? The kits that are linked in the description below with the actual face buttons that we're using come with the tools you need. It's very simple. Step 1 is for me to go in the other room, brush my teeth, do my hair, slap on some cologne that you won't smell and get cute for this video. Then I'm going to overhead or bird's eye view the camera and we're going to disassemble this controller and make it look super sexy. One thing to note right off Jump Street, this is going to void the warranty as any modification or customization of a controller does. When you tear it down, disassemble it, the manufacturer doesn't fuck with you anymore. However, we didn't fuck with them from the start, so it's not a big deal. We dumped them first. Now, just like when you strap a fat turbo on your Toyota Corolla or your Honda Civic, it is going to void that manufacturer warranty. However, you're dusting doors off and simply don't care. This is going to be a substantially sexier controller than anything that you can buy right off a shelf. So in that aspect, we don't really care about that factory warranty anyway. Just get it out of here.
This is your controller captain. We've reached 6,900 feet. Go ahead and start flicking the sticks and mollywopping the back paddles.
You don't like back paddles? How about those rear buttons? We've tested almost 100 custom and premium controllers and we're only at the beginning. You need a thumbstick guide or a tutorial on how to overclock your controller? Check out the controller playlist.
Bing bong.
Controller captain out.
The first step when disassembling an Xbox One or Series controller is going to be to remove the battery. That's not so you don't electrocute yourself. I don't really care about your safety, but there is actually a T8 screw under here which you need to get to. Now I'm going to break into either one of these kits and get to this plastic pry tool. They do come with the kit. However, if you don't have this or it breaks or something, you can actually use your fingernails and you are going to need to pop off both of these side panels. Now, as these are custom painted from Razer, I'm going to try and keep them intact and not scrape the paint job. The little bit of customization that Razer actually did here. Get it started here at the top. And if you have multiple of these pry tools, which I do, it's actually easier. Just keep one jammed in over here and wedge over here. I'm going to work harder today. I got some insane range on that. That was awesome. Now, removing the sticker is basically a tamper seal that lets the manufacturer know that this controller has been tampered with and it will void the warranty. We've already covered that that was going to happen. You have two options. You can remove this sticker and then reapply it later if you want that OEM factory look, or you can just puncture in the middle where the hole is, which is what I'm going to do. Boom. Remember, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, so we're turning counterclockwise or this-a-way to loosen this bad boy. Now, I do recommend having some kind of a little dish or tray to keep all your screws organized, as there are going to be two different sizes, the larger T8s and the smaller T6s. These side panels actually come off really easy in comparison to a standard Xbox controller, which this technically is, but I don't know. Maybe because it's been painted by Razer or something, those popped off super easy. You're gonna have two T8 screws on each palm grip, and to evenly distribute pressure on the controller, I do recommend loosening these in somewhat of a star pattern, crisscross applesauce, back and forth. Not as important as putting on a car tire or anything, but it will make your job a lot easier. And these are jacked in real tight. Oh, those are no joke. It does help to have magnetized tip tools, which this one is not. However, you can buy one of these $5 blocks on Amazon that will magnetize and demagnetize the tips of your tools. This will also be linked in the description below. Awesome. With all 5 of those T8 screws removed, you will be able to lift up your faceplate. Very nice, very nice. Go ahead and remove the back shell. Now, be a little bit cautious when you're removing this back shell because you are going to have these 2 prongs, which are for the battery tray. And if these get bent, broken, or snap off, well, you're not getting power to your controller. We're going to group all of our large T8 screws together. Now we're going to move on to the smaller T6s. Let's go ahead and remove this plastic center section. There is a prong or a peg on each side, which you can just lift up with your small screwdriver. Pops off like that. As you can see, one of the thumbstick bases actually popped off. We'll remove the other one now because we are going to be replacing them. This metal stabilizer ring around the D-pad, get a fingernail up underneath there. Go ahead and remove it. Do not bend it because we're going to be reusing this. To remove the bumpers, you will need to push them down to expand them, and there's a little plastic peg or prong on each side. Use the screwdriver and remove these little plastic pegs on each side of the bumper. Will pop off like that. You have your pairing button up here, which used to be loose and just go popping off on the older Xbox controllers. Go ahead and flip it around the backside and start removing these smaller T6 screws. Let's remove the daughter board first, which is the one that is sandwiched on the back. Did not magnetize the tip of our T6 yet. Now, before we remove this daughter board from the motherboard, we're going to remove these two black wires. They simply lift up and they are on these little metal pads. And you're able to remove this board, but be cognizant of the fact that it is still connected with wires. So we're just going to lift it up and out of the way like that. When we go to return this to its factory position, these female ends will line up with these male ends. The module for the 3.5mm jack will just go loose and wiggly, but it will drop into place like that with the metal prongs facing upward. Now we can get access to the rest of the T6 screws. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now the most difficult part of this build is going to be installing the face buttons because it requires the most disassembly of the controller going all the way down to the board, but it's okay. We're going to get through this together. Keep your T6s separate from your T8s. We'll make reassembly much easier for you. Go ahead and remove the motherboard. And as you can see, all of your face or action buttons are in here. We're going to go ahead and remove the Xbox button, the share and option buttons. Now, since we're replacing these, the easiest way to do it is just to turn it upside down. They will go spilling out like that. Now the sockets are ready for the new buttons. And you cannot install the wrong buttons in the wrong position because they have different plastic cutouts here, and that will line up with the new face or action buttons, and they can only socket in one way. Also, something else to note, the B button is noticeably longer than the other face buttons on Xbox One and Series controllers. Another note, Xbox Series face buttons stick out just a millimeter or two longer than Xbox One controllers. I ran into this issue myself on the white controller build. So we're going to line up our face and accessory buttons as well as our D-pad, get everything all dialed in. Holy moly, these look nice. Now, I did buy this kit over here just for the metal thumbsticks. I'm not going to be using these bullet buttons because bullets don't really go with the lore of Star Wars. Oh, those are sick. And in case you're wondering about the functionality of these metal thumbsticks, I have used gamepads with metal thumbsticks in the past, but I'm also going to have some Control Freak slip-over caps as well. Go ahead and clean up our workstation by getting rid of all these old stalker parts that we are not going to be reusing. So same thing with the pause and option buttons. You can't put those in wrong because one of them is a 2-prong and one of them is a 3-prong. And again, all these face buttons have different cutouts. Kit does not come with a chrome home button, and even if it did, I was not going to use that because I have a translucent sticker that's going to let the light bleed through this. It's going to look really cool. Okay, so at this point, we're going to take the motherboard and snap it back into place to hold all of our buttons in place. Let's get that new pairing button in there as well. Beautiful, beautiful. And this rubber plunger mechanism, which is the membrane, is actually going to make contact with all these buttons and hold them into place. And go ahead and return your T6 screws to the board. I like to start with this middle one because it kind of holds everything in place. Now at this point, before you assemble the controller anymore, once you have a couple of screws holding the motherboard in place, I would recommend testing all these buttons just to make sure that they're not jammed in, because I've fully reassembled Xbox controllers and then had to tear them back down. Oop, sorry baby. Also, I really do like these face buttons because they still have the lettering ABXY instead of just being all chrome, which I think looks much better. Now don't worry if the B button still feels really squishy because it's actually not making contact with anything. This is the only face button that makes contact with the daughter board and not the motherboard. But they all press, so we're going to move on with the T6 screws. Now screwing these in, you want to go snug, hand tight, but don't jack them down as hard as you can because this PCB, this printed circuit board, isn't the strongest thing in the world. You could win a strength competition with it, but then you're going to be out of controller. And since your warranty's been voided when we disassembled this controller, you don't want to mess it up. Okay, let's go ahead and realign the daughter board and see we're missing that 3.5mm headphone jack. Almost forgot about it. Gonna pop it in there with the metal ends up and make sure that these two black wires right here are actually fed up to the top board like that, because they're gonna have to plug into these metal pads as I mentioned earlier. And now that B button's actually pressing like a normal button because it's making contact with the secondary board over here. And as for these two black cables, this left one is going to go to the top pad, and you will actually feel them snap into place. Probably have to use a fingernail. I did. Once you line them up, you just apply firm pressure, and I do mean firm. You got to give it a good press. And then to keep everything all neat and organized, you can tuck the wires into these little cutouts. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and change out these triggers. There is going to be a T6 screw on each side. Notice these are magnetized, so it just snaps the screw over to it. You kind of have to wrestle with it. It's really going to try and jank that screw from you. Now there is a little plastic pin right there that you're just going to pry it off. Bam. Now you do have a secondary vibration motor for each trigger. You want to keep these cables in place unless you don't want vibration functionality, which I do. And while we're on the topic, if you wanted to remove the rumble force motors, now would be the time. You simply lift up on these modules and then you're going to firmly grasp this red and black wire and simply pull it off the board. That's going to save you weight, save you battery life, but you're not going to have vibration functionality, which I do want on this controller. That was another change that the Xbox Series controllers made over the Xbox One controllers, is these rumble force motors used to just be loose and wiggly when you removed the rear shell, and a lot of the times they would just simply fall out and rip these cords off, and you'd have to resolder them if you wanted vibration back. As where these are firmly held in here with these black clips now, same thing with the pairing button, it's actually sandwiched underneath the board, so this isn't loose and just falling out. So a lot of changes on the inside that make repair and customization much, much easier. I'm holding it up here and it's not even in frame. Down here, Kevin, show the good people what you're talking about. So we're gonna put those vibro motors back up in there. They are labeled, but quite shittily, RT and LT on there. It's quite not legible. And then reinstalling them, you're gonna line up this little plastic prong or peg first. It will fold over like that, and then you can screw back in your T6 screw, which the easiest way to do that is actually to line it up on your magnetized screwdriver first. This is probably one of my least favorite parts of the Xbox controllers, is the trigger caps, just because you're juggling with the wires of the vibration motor, and it's always just a pain in the butthole. You just tuck the wire up underneath those clips, and it should hold in place no problemo. All right, new bumpers, you're gonna hold down the triggers. You literally do need to hold them down, or else they'll just pop up like that, and you won't be able to install your bumpers. Make sure LB is on the left and RB is on the right. Much easier than the original Xbox One controller prior to them doing the midlife refresh where they added Bluetooth. The bumpers used to be so damned hard to change out, but now they have these plastic clips on each side which actually hold it in place much more even. I like that. Now we're going to put on the center section. It's going to hold everything together. We're going to line up the USB-C port as well as the pairing button. Two little plastic prongs right there. Line them up with the two plastic holes right there. Yes sir, yes sir. Just push down. That's all you got to do. Bam. One more. Beautiful. You're still the controller captain. You don't need to quit your job. It worked. We're fine here. We're all fine here. Now don't worry if the bumpers aren't pressing down. Like right now the bumpers aren't really pressing normally. That's because the triggers are just cocked up with the springs. If you hold them down, now the bumpers are fine, but when you put the shells together, it's actually going to hold down these triggers and allow you to hit the bumpers cleanly. Now, there's only one way to socket this D-pad. Just keep rotating it around until it drops in like that. Whoop, oh boy, like that. There we go. Give it a little testaroo, how do you do? And then we're going to use this retention ring that has a clip on each side, the top and bottom. Come on, sweetheart. The entire internet is watching right now. There we go. Awesome. And as for these metal thumbsticks, there's a little cutout or shape in there. And you line that up with the stem of the thumbstick modules. Yeah, this is the shaft. Oh, fuck me sideways. Ah, jeez. Oh boy. Come on. These just don't want to fucking do it. Oh, that would explain it. That would explain why there was no structural integrity there. I'm still missing T6 screws over here, for God's sake. Good lord. I'm missing a T6 screw over there and one on each side here. These thumbsticks are actually super, super tight. I had to push them on with a ridiculous amount of force. Hopefully I didn't break anything, but my God, they just did not want to slide onto those stems or shafts. Perfect. We are in it to win it. Now, I was going to hydro dip the rear shell. However, for this build, I think I'm gonna just, fuck that. I'm not gonna do that. I do have a tutorial from like 2 years ago, which I'll link in the description below, where I'm sweating my ass off in my home garage and I'm hydro dipping a controller and explaining the process. So we're gonna take the controller guts or chassis and we're gonna drop it into this rear shell. But you're not just simply gonna drop it. You're gonna line up these two prongs, which is for the battery tray, and they line up like that. Boom, they'll line up just like that. Just set that screw in there. It's just going to be spinning indefinitely because on this side, as you can see, it's just sticking out the front because that actually makes contact with all of these prongs on the front shell. Oh my God, that looks so sick. So what you want to line up is these two holes on each palm grip as well as this hole in the center. And I like to screw in the middle T8 screw first just to kind of hold everything together. Go ahead and snap on the side panels, which you can't install on the wrong side. Line up the clips. And since these are chrome buttons and we've been fiddling with them the whole time, we're gonna wipe them off with a microfiber and get some glamour shots, because damn. Over here wired up to the PC, anytime you do any customization or repair work on a controller, an Xbox controller I should say, I do recommend doing some diagnostic work inside of the Xbox accessory app, which comes pre-installed on Windows 10 or 11 PCs, as well as Xbox One and Series consoles. Quite a mouthful, quite a breathful. This little beakered or test tube icon down here is going to be the diagnostics that we're looking for, and now as we press each one of these face or action buttons, move the analog sticks around, it is registering all the inputs and showing that we have a properly working controller here.
I am absolutely blown away with how this controller turned out. I also didn't run into any major issues or any minor issues, any issues period. It was a very smooth build, but this was a little bit more involved than just sticking on some bolt-ons to the outside of your controller. We did have to partially disassemble our controller to change out those face buttons, and I think it looks absolutely amazing. It is fully functional and gameable even with those metal thumbsticks, which actually feel pretty good on the fingertips. Granted, you don't get any grip because they're metal, but they still work, and you can always pop on Control Freaks or some kind of slip-over thumbstick cap. The only issue with going with chrome buttons, whether they're silver chrome, gold chrome, or a colored chrome, is going to be, of course, they're going to collect fingerprints and maybe even micro scratches, but definitely smudges and fingerprints. I'm constantly going to be wiping this thing with a microfiber. All the parts used in today's build are, of course, down there in the description below. Drop in the comment section below your opinion of this controller, and I'll see you Stallions and Stallionettes tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at Gamer Heaven. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. To get in touch with myself and the Stallions and Stallionettes of Gamer Heaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding, starting June I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting Gamer Heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily, all the time, 60% of the time, sometimes, most of the time. Peace.